The first body I ever buried was my father's. The second was a stranger I killed with a splitting maul on the fourth night after the outbreak. But the fortress, the quarry, that started 18 months before any of it. That started with a lie I told myself about why I needed a place no one could find. My name is Elliot Voss. I was 34 when I bought the mineral rights to an abandoned limestone quarry outside of Harrodsburg, Kentucky. 67 acres of nothing. Sheer walls dropping into flooded pits, rusted equipment bleeding orange into the rain. The listing had been active for 9 years. The previous owner died intestate, and his family wanted it gone the way you want a tumor gone. I paid $11,000 for a landscape that looked like the earth had been punched open. People asked why. My sister Nora asked 3 times in one phone call, her voice tight with that specific frustration she saved for me. You don't even camp, Elliot. You get sunburns walking to the mailbox. I told her it was an investment. That limestone had value, that someone would want to develop it eventually. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was afraid. Not of anything specific, not yet. Just a low, persistent hum that had been building since my early 30s. I watched the news the way some people watch horror films, not for information, but for confirmation. Every supply chain failure, every strange disease cluster, every satellite image of something burning somewhere. I wasn't a prepper. I didn't have a YouTube channel or a manifesto. I had a 9-to-5 drafting job at an architectural firm in Lexington and a 1-bedroom apartment with a cat named Diesel. But I had this feeling, constant as tinnitus, that the surface of things was thinner than anyone admitted. The quarry gave me somewhere to put that feeling, somewhere physical, somewhere I could dig. I started in March, drove out every weekend with hand tools and a rented generator. The quarry had 3 levels: the upper shelf where the access road ended, a mid-level bench about 40 feet down where they'd stopped cutting in the 1980s, and then the flooded pit at the bottom, 60 feet of green water with visibility measured in inches. The mid-level bench was my target. It had a natural overhang where the limestone face jutted out, 20 feet of solid rock ceiling. Behind it, the old blast holes from decades of extraction had created a network of shallow caves and fractured chambers. I wasn't building a bunker. That's important. I was building something I could live in, something that didn't feel like hiding. I poured a concrete floor first, leveled it, sealed it, ran drainage channels to the quarry's natural slope, then framing. I used pressure-treated lumber and steel brackets, building interior walls beneath a rock ceiling, like fitting a house inside a rib cage. 2 rooms became 4. 4 became 6. I insulated with spray foam, ran a 200-amp electrical panel off a propane generator. I hauled down the quarry wall piece by piece using a hand winch. I bolted into the rock. Marcus found me in June. Marcus Okafor. He was a geotechnical engineer who'd surveyed the quarry years before for some county assessment. He saw my truck parked at the access road 3 weekends in a row and finally drove down to investigate. Found me drilling anchor bolts into limestone at 7 in the morning, covered in rock dust, with talk radio playing from a battery speaker. "You're going to bring that overhang down on yourself," was the first thing he said. He was wrong about that. The rock was solid, competent limestone with no fracture planes in the load-bearing sections. But he was right about 3 other things I was doing wrong. And he told me all of them before I even asked his name. Marcus was like that. Blunt in a way that felt generous rather than aggressive, and he was 51, recently divorced, and bored in the specific way that highly competent people get bored when their skills aren't being used. He came back the next weekend with a ground-penetrating radar unit he'd borrowed from his old firm. mapped the entire overhang, the cave network behind it, the water table depth. Drew me diagrams on the back of fast food napkins. By July, he was there every Saturday, and by August, he'd stopped pretending he was just advising. We never talked about why, not directly. Marcus watched the same news I did. He'd been in Port-au-Prince after the 2010 earthquake, had seen how fast order dissolves when infrastructure fails. He never said the word collapse. He said redundancy. He said depth. He said time buying. We had 14 months. By October of that first year, the fortress had bones. 6 rooms beneath the overhang, sealed, insulated, ventilated through shafts we drilled up through 30 feet of rock to exit points hidden among the scrub oak on the quarry's upper rim. The main living space was 12 by 20 feet, with a poured concrete ceiling reinforced with rebar. It felt like a submarine, contained but not claustrophobic. Marcus had insisted on ceiling height. 7.5 feet minimum, he said. Anything less and your brain starts counting the hours. He was right. The space felt livable. We ran water lines from a natural spring that fed into the quarry's mid-level. Gravity-fed, filtered through a 3-stage system Marcus designed using ceramic candles and activated carbon. 12 gallons a day, reliable through 3 seasons. Winter would slow it, but the thermal mass of the surrounding rock kept the pipes from freezing at depth. I spent $14,000 between March and December. My savings account looked like something had been feeding on it. I stopped eating out, canceled subscriptions, took freelance drafting work on evenings. Every dollar I didn't spend on rent or food went into the quarry. Nora noticed. She drove down from Indianapolis in November, unannounced, because I'd missed 2 family dinners and stopped answering her Tuesday calls. "You look thin," she said, standing in my apartment doorway. Diesel wound between her ankles. "And it smells like you've been burning something." "Spray foam off gases," I told her. "Gets in your clothes." She stayed 2 hours, made me eat leftover pasta she'd brought in a cooler. Talked about her daughter, my niece Lily, who was 7 and learning violin badly. I smiled at the right moments. I think she wanted to ask more, but Nora had learned years ago that pushing me produced withdrawal, not honesty. She hugged me at the door and said, "Whatever you're doing, please be careful." I thought about telling her. I thought about driving her out to the quarry, showing her the overhang, the rooms taking shape beneath the rock. But I knew how it would sound. I knew the word she'd use, the one our mother had used about our father in his final years. Paranoid. As if naming the fear dismissed the thing being feared. Marcus and I worked through winter on interior systems. A wood-burning stove vented through a chimney shaft disguised as a natural crack in the quarry wall. Solar panels on the upper rim, wired down through conduit embedded in the rock face. Invisible from below, nearly invisible from above. A composting toilet system. Storage rooms for food, water, fuel, medical supplies. We built everything twice, once functionally, once with concealment in mind. The quarry's geography was our greatest asset. The access road was a single, unpaved track that curved through dense woodland for half a mile before opening onto the upper shelf. From the shelf, you couldn't see the mid-level bench without walking to the edge and looking down. From the bench, the fortress entrance was recessed beneath the overhang. Hidden behind a false rock wall Marcus constructed from actual limestone fragments bonded with colored moride. You could stand 10 feet away and see only cliff face. By February of the second year, I'd started stockpiling. Canned goods, freeze-dried meals, ammunition for the Mossberg 590 I'd bought, and the Ruger 1022 I'd owned since college. Water purification tablets, antibiotics, azithromycin and amoxicillin, purchased through a veterinary supply company, diesel fuel for the generator, propane tanks, hand tools, seeds, books, not survival manuals, but novels, poetry, histories. Marcus brought chess sets and a shortwave radio he'd built from a kit in the 1990s. "We're not going to just survive," he said, positioning the radio on a shelf he'd built into the rock wall. "We're going to stay human." I didn't know then how hard that would become, how quickly the distance between surviving and staying human would stretch until it snapped. The news that spring was strange. Not alarming, strange. Clusters of unusual violence in 3 West African nations. A WHO advisory about a novel pathogen with neurological presentation. Message boards I followed lit up with speculation. But message boards always lit up. I'd learned to filter signal from noise, or thought I had. Marcus was more attentive. He started sleeping at the quarry on weeknights, driving to his consulting jobs from there rather than his apartment in Lexington. "It's the transmission vector," he said one evening in April, reading something on his laptop by the light of our solar-charged battery bank. "They're not releasing transmission data. When they don't release transmission data, it means the transmission data is frightening." 3 weeks later, the CDC issued its first domestic advisory. 2 weeks after that, I drove to Indianapolis and brought Nora and Lily back with me. Nora didn't come willingly. That's the wrong word. She came because Lily was with her, and because the footage from Nashville was already 20 hours old, and no one in authority was saying the things that would have made it possible to stay. But she didn't come as someone who believed. She came as someone whose options had narrowed. I remember her face in the passenger seat of my truck, Lily asleep in the back with Diesel's carrier on her lap. It was 2 a.m., Interstate 65 moving at walking speed southbound and completely empty northbound. Everyone fleeing the wrong direction, toward cities, toward density, toward the assumption that help would concentrate where people concentrated. Nora watched the empty lanes and said nothing for 40 miles. Then, "You knew." I didn't know. I prepared for something. I didn't know what. "Elliot." Her voice was flat. "You built a bunker." "It's not a bunker. It's a..." "Don't." She turned to check on Lily. The girl was still sleeping, headphones in, the tablet I'd given her playing some animated show on loop. "Don't tell me what it's not. Not tonight?" We reached the quarry at 4:15 a.m. Marcus was waiting at the access road with a flashlight and the Mossberg. He'd heard my radio call 20 minutes earlier. We'd established a channel months before. Tested it weekly. He looked at Nora, looked at Lily's sleeping form in my arms, and simply turned to lead us down the path he'd cut into the quarry wall. Steps carved into limestone, with rope handrails bolted every 6 feet. Nora stopped at the bottom, staring at the false rock wall. Marcus pressed the recessed lever, a simple mechanical latch, no electronics to fail, and the wall section swung inward on steel hinges. Behind it, warm light. The hum of the ventilation system, the smell of concrete and cedar. "Oh," Nora said. Just that. Lily didn't wake until morning. I'd set up the 4th room, originally designated as secondary storage, as a sleeping space 2 weeks earlier, when the WHO upgraded their advisory. Small mattress, sleeping bag, a battery lantern shaped like a mushroom that I'd bought at a craft fair years ago for no reason I could articulate. Lily opened her eyes, saw the mushroom light, and said, "Uncle Elliot, are we camping?" "Yes," I said. "Underground camping." "The best kind." She accepted that with the terrifying adaptability of children. Nora did not. But Nora's adaptation came differently, not through acceptance, but through competence. Within 3 days, she'd reorganized our food storage, established a rotation schedule, waterproofed the secondary entrance Marcus and I had left unfinished. She didn't speak to me about the world above. She worked. The first infected I saw was on day 6, not at the quarry. I'd driven the truck to the quarry's upper rim to check the solar panels and scout the access road. Through binoculars, on the county road a quarter-mile east, a figure moved with that gait. You know it when you see it. The news footage hadn't prepared me, not for the speed, not for the stuttering quality of the movement, like a film skipping frames. It was a woman in hospital scrubs, barefoot running east along the center line of the road. Not shambling, running. Her head snapped side to side in a rhythm that seemed mechanical, scanning, hunting. I lowered the binoculars and felt my hands vibrating. Not fear, not yet. Recognition. The thing I'd felt for years. The hum, the thinning surface. It had broken through. The world I'd prepared for was here. And it looked exactly as wrong as I'd imagined. I drove back down into the quarry and told Marcus. He nodded once, slowly, then walked to the shortwave radio and began scanning frequencies. Military bands were active, encrypted but active. Civilian emergency frequencies were chaos. Overlapping voices, some calm, some screaming, some just open microphones broadcasting ambient sound that made your stomach clench. That night, I sealed the access road. Marcus and I had prepared for this. 2 loads of quarry rubble positioned on the upper shelf with a mechanical release. We tripped it and 3 tons of limestone cascaded across the road's entry point. From the county road, it would look like a natural rockfall. No road, no quarry, no us. We disappeared beneath 67 acres of abandoned earth, and the world above began to die. 14 days underground before I killed the man, with a splitting maul. I need to say that plainly, because I've spent months trying to find a gentler version of the sentence, and there isn't one. I keep the maul in the secondary entrance now, blade up against the wall. And every time I pass it, I think about how a single object can divide your life into before and after. But I'm getting ahead. The 14 days first. We established routine because routine is the architecture of sanity when every external structure has collapsed. Marcus understood this intuitively. He'd worked disaster zones. Nora understood it because she was a mother, and mothers build routine the way engineers build bridges, out of necessity and against gravity. I understood it because Marcus and Nora told me to, and I was smart enough to listen. Mornings, system checks, generator fuel level, battery bank charge, water flow from the spring, ventilation shaft integrity. Marcus handled these. He'd moved through the fortress with a clipboard, an actual paper clipboard, because he said writing things down created accountability that screens didn't. He'd check items off with a mechanical pencil and leave the clipboard on the radio shelf where anyone could review it. Mid-mornings, Lily's schooling. Nora had grabbed textbooks during our evacuation. 2nd grade math, a reading anthology, a science workbook with cartoon animals explaining photosynthesis. Lily worked at a folding table in the main room while Nora sat beside her. I could hear them through the walls. Nora's patient voice, Lily's questions, which grew stranger as the days passed. Mom, do plants need sunlight, or can they use flashlights? Mom, if we stay here forever, will I still grow taller? Afternoons, maintenance, inventory, planning. Marcus and I fortified. We extended the false walls mechanism, adding a secondary barrier, a steel gate we'd welded from rebar and angle iron. set back 8 feet from the primary entrance. If someone breached the false wall, they'd face a locked gate with 12 inches of clearance on either side. Not enough to swing a tool effectively, enough for us to see them and to respond. Evenings, radio monitoring. I took the night shifts because I slept poorly anyway. The frequencies told stories in fragments. A National Guard unit in Tennessee requesting extraction that never came. A family in rural Ohio broadcasting their address and begging for help until their signal cut mid-sentence on day 9. A man who called himself Lighthouse, broadcasting survival tips and scripture from somewhere in the Appalachians. His signal was strong and consistent. I never responded. Operational security. But I listened. His voice was steady. It helped. On day 12, Lily asked to go outside. "Not yet, sweetheart," Nora said. "When?" "When it's safe." "When will it be safe?" Nora looked at me. In her eyes, I saw the question she wouldn't ask aloud. Will it ever be? I had no answer. I'd prepared for siege, for isolation, for the mechanics of survival underground. I had not prepared for a 7-year-old's need for sky. That afternoon, I walked up the internal stairway. A narrow shaft we'd cut into the rock face, emerging through a hatch on the mid-level bench outside the overhang. The quarry was empty, silent. The flooded pit below, green and still. I could see the upper rim, the tree line, a strip of gray sky. Nothing moved. No sound except wind, and very faintly, something I couldn't identify from the east. A rhythmic thudding that might have been construction or destruction or something else entirely. I stood there for 10 minutes, breathing air that wasn't filtered, feeling rain on my face. Then I went back inside and told Lily she could come up for 15 minutes the next morning if she wore her coat and stayed close. Her smile, God, that smile broke something in me that hadn't broken yet. Day 14, the man. I need to tell it. I was on the upper rim checking the solar array. Mid-afternoon, overcast. The kind of gray sky that flattens everything into the same dull register. The panels were underperforming. Leaf litter and a cracked junction box on the 3rd panel. I was crouched with a multimeter and a wire brush when I heard footsteps on the access road below. Not infected footsteps. Human. Deliberate, cautious. The sound of someone trying to be quiet and mostly succeeding. I set the multimeter down slowly and moved to the rim's edge. Through the scrub oak, I could see a section of the road where our rubble blockade began. A man was climbing over it. He was mid-40s, heavy-set, wearing a canvas hunting jacket and carrying a large backpack. In his right hand, a pistol, looked like a compact 9mm. He moved with effort but purpose, scanning as he climbed. On the other side of the blockade, visible through a gap in the rubble, I could see a second figure waiting. Smaller, possibly a teenager, holding a long gun of some kind. I should have gone down. Should have returned to the fortress, locked the gate, gone dark. That was the protocol Marcus and I had agreed on. Unknown contacts, observe, avoid, conceal. But the man was already over the blockade and moving down the access road, toward the upper shelf, toward the quarry's edge. If he reached the edge and looked down, he'd see the bench, the overhang, possibly the false wall if he looked carefully. And he was looking carefully. His head moved with the systematic sweep of someone who expected to find something. I had the Ruger with me. I always carried it on surface checks. I chambered around and moved through the tree line parallel to the road, staying low. He reached the shelf in 4 minutes, stood at the edge, looked down. "There's something down there," he called back toward the blockade. His voice was hoarse but controlled. Some kind of structure under the overhang. I stepped out of the tree line. "Stop!" He spun. The pistol came up fast, faster than I expected from his size. I had the Ruger at my shoulder already. "Easy," I said. "Put it down. I've got people with me." His eyes were calculating, not panicked. "My son's back at the road. We're just looking for shelter." "There's no shelter here. It's a quarry. Flooded. Dangerous. I can see the structure." "You see rock?" "I see walls. I see a door." He hadn't lowered the pistol. "Listen, friend. We've been walking for 6 days. My son is 16 and hasn't eaten since yesterday. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because that—" He gestured behind him with his chin toward the world beyond the quarry. "Is not survivable in the open. You know that. You're here for the same reason." My finger was on the trigger guard. Not the trigger, the guard. 2 inches of intent separating me from a decision I'd never made before. "I can't let you down there," I said. "Can't or won't. Both." He stared at me. Then something shifted in his face. Not aggression, but a hardening. The look of a man calculating odds. He had a gun. I had a gun. His son had a gun. I was alone on the surface, and he knew it now. "We're coming down," he said, not asking. What happened next happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He turned his head, just slightly, just enough to call back to his son. And I moved. Not a decision. A reflex shaped by 14 days of fear and the absolute certainty that if he brought his people into our quarry, into our fortress, we would never be safe again. The splitting maul was leaning against the equipment shed on the upper shelf, a relic from our construction left there weeks ago. I crossed the distance in 3 strides. He heard me, turned back, the pistol rising. The maul connected with his forearm first. The gun fell. Then momentum and terror, and something I don't have a name for, carried the second swing. I will not describe what happened to his body. His son was screaming from the blockade. I could hear it. Raw, young, broken. I stood over the man with the maul in my hands, and blood on the limestone, and the boy's screams reaching me like something from very far away. I left him there, on the shelf. I took his pistol, his backpack. I walked to the edge and vomited into the quarry. Then I went down the stairs and sealed the hatch. The boy's screaming stopped eventually. I don't know if he came over the blockade. I don't know if he found his father. I don't know what happened to him. I know what happened to me. Marcus saw the blood on my hands before I could wash it off. He was in the main room, clipboard in hand, mid-morning check. He looked at my hands, then my face, then the maul I'd carried down with me. I hadn't even realized I was still holding it. "Elliot?" A man, on the upper shelf. He saw the fortress. He was armed. He had someone with him. Marcus set the clipboard down carefully. "Is he dead?" "Yes." The other one. "Still at the blockade, I think. A kid, teenager." Marcus closed his eyes. I watched him process it. The engineer's mind sorting inputs, calculating structural loads. When he opened his eyes, his voice was even. "We need to move the body. If it attracts—" "I know. Tonight, after dark. I know." He didn't ask me if I'd had to do it. He didn't tell me it was justified or unjustified. He walked to the sink, turned on the tap, our precious spring water, and stood aside so I could wash my hands. The water ran pink, then clear. Nora was with Lily in the back room. She didn't see. I thank whatever force governs these things for that. But she heard something in my voice at dinner. The sound a person's words make when they're being generated from a place that's newly hollow. She watched me across the table, where Lily was drawing pictures of the quarry with crayons, narrating as she drew. This is the big rock. This is where the water is. This is where we sleep. After Lily was asleep, Nora found me in the storage room, sitting on an ammunition crate with my head in my hands. Marcus told me, she said. I asked him not to. He was right to tell me. I live here too. I need to know what's happening. A man tried to come in. I stopped him. She knelt in front of me, took my hands, the same hands, washed now, steady now, but different forever. Elliot, look at me. I looked. Her eyes were dry, hard, certain. I have a 7-year-old daughter, 50 feet from the surface of a world that's ended. If someone tries to take this from us, from her, you do what you did, every time. Do you understand? I understood what she was saying. I didn't understand how she could say it so clearly, how the moral architecture could be that simple for her. Maybe motherhood strips away the ambiguity. Maybe when you have a child, the calculus reduces to a single variable. The boy, I said. He had a son, 16. Something moved in her face, a flinch quickly controlled. Did the boy see you? I don't think so. He was behind the blockade. Then he doesn't know we're here. He'll move on. He might not. His father's body is up there. Marcus said you're moving it tonight. That night, Marcus and I carried the body to the flooded pit and let it slide in. The water took it silently, green closing over canvas and flesh, bubbles rising for a moment, and then nothing. We scrubbed the limestone with bleach solution where the blood had pooled. Rain would do the rest. I looked out over the quarry in the dark, the walls rising around us like hands cupped protectively, or like a grave. The distinction seemed to shift depending on the hour. You did what was necessary, Marcus said, standing beside me. His voice carried no judgment, no comfort either, just fact. I don't know if that's true. I know, that's why I said it. We stood there for a while, in the dark, in the stone bowl of the quarry, listening to the world end somewhere above us. Then we went back inside, sealed the hatch, and I lay on my cot staring at the concrete ceiling until the generator's rhythm put me to sleep. In the morning, Lily asked why my eyes were red, and I told her the ventilation had been dusty. She accepted it. Children accept so much. It's their survival mechanism, and it's the thing that makes you want to protect them past the point of your own humanity. 6 weeks in, the shortwave radio became our window and our torment. Lighthouse still broadcast nightly, 8 p.m., 15 minutes, consistent as a metronome. His signal suggested he was within 50 miles, somewhere in the Appalachian foothills east of us. He'd shifted from survival tips to something more like oral history, documenting what he'd seen, what he'd heard from others. He spoke about the infected with clinical precision, their speed, their coordination, which seemed to increase in groups. The sound they made, not moaning, not screaming, but a clicking vocalization that carried further than it should, that seemed to orient others toward it. They hunt in auditory chains, Lighthouse said one night, his voice crackling through our speaker. One clicks, and every infected within a quarter-mile radius turns toward the source. Then the nearest one clicks, and the radius expands. I've watched a single initial contact draw 40 or more within 15 minutes. The implication is clear. Silence is survival. Noise is death. Marcus and I had already intuited this, but hearing it confirmed changed our protocols. We'd been running the generator for 4 hours daily, enough to maintain battery charge and run essential systems. The generator was housed in a natural alcove deep within the cave network, behind the main fortress, muffled by rock on all sides. Its sound was minimal on the surface. But minimal wasn't zero. We cut generator use to 2 hours, shifted maximum activity to solar power, which was silent but weather-dependent, built a manual water pump as backup for the electric one. Every modification reduced our comfort and increased our labor. Every modification was necessary. Lily adapted to the silence rule the way she adapted to everything, totally without apparent trauma. She learned to whisper play, to draw instead of sing, to ask questions with her hands when we were near the entrance. Nora taught her a simplified sign language cobbled together from ASL basics and invented gestures. Within a week, Lily was signing requests for water, food, bathroom, and "I want to go up," the last one being a flat hand rising toward the ceiling. I took her up every third day, 15 minutes on the mid-level bench, under the overhang, where the quarry walls shielded us from view on 3 sides. She'd stand with her face turned up to the strip of sky visible above the rim, arms slightly extended, breathing like she was drinking the air. She never made sound during these trips, not once. 7 years old and already understanding that the world above required a kind of discipline that was indistinguishable from fear. The radio brought us other voices too. A group in Western Virginia, 4 adults, coordinates shared openly, requesting trade. Marcus and I debated responding for 2 days before deciding against it. Operational security was absolute. Anyone could be listening. Anyone could be taking notes on positions, supplies, vulnerabilities. Then, on day 43, a new signal. Different from anything we'd heard. A woman's voice. Close. Very close, the signal strong and clear, broadcasting on a frequency just below lighthouses. "This is Dr. Ava Chen, formerly of the University of Kentucky Department of Virology. I am broadcasting from a mobile position in central Kentucky. I have information about the pathogen. I am looking for a secure location to continue research. I have equipment and data. If anyone receiving this has a fortified position and is willing to negotiate shelter in exchange for scientific expertise, please respond on this frequency between 0600 and 0800 hours. I will monitor for 7 days." Marcus and I looked at each other across the radio shelf. The message repeated twice more, then silence. "Could be real," Marcus said. "Could be a trap." A trap using virology credentials is sophisticated. These aren't bandits. Bandits learn. He was quiet for a moment. If she's real, if she actually has research data on the pathogen, that changes our calculus. Our calculus is stay hidden, stay alive. Our calculus was built for short-term siege. Elliot, it's been 6 weeks. There's no cavalry. No extraction. This isn't a storm we wait out. If there's someone who understands what this thing is, what it does, how it might be countered. We don't know that she knows any of that. We don't know anything. That's the point. I let the argument rest, but I thought about it all night, lying on my cot, listening to the ventilation system whisper and the distant drip of water in the cave network. I thought about the man on the upper shelf, the one I'd killed. He'd wanted in. He'd had a son. I'd said no with a splitting maul. Now a woman with possible knowledge, possible hope was asking. And my instinct was the same. No. Keep the walls sealed, keep the stone between us and everything else. Was that caution, or was that the thing I'd become on day 14? A man who could only say no. A man whose fear had calcified into something that felt like wisdom, but might have been cowardice. I didn't answer the radio, not that night. On the 5th day of Dr. Chen's broadcast window, Marcus answered without telling me. I found out because I woke early. 4 a.m., my body's new rhythm, tuned to anxiety, and found him at the radio console, headphones on, writing on his clipboard. He looked up when he heard me and didn't try to hide what he'd done. "I made contact," he said. "She's real. She's 4 miles east, moving on foot with one other person, a graduate student named Thomas. They have a portable PCR machine and 3 months of data on infected tissue samples." I stood in the doorway of the radio room, feeling something hot and unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger, closer to betrayal. "You had no right. I had every right. This is my place too. I built it with you." We agreed. No contact, no exceptions. We agreed before someone offered us information that might mean the difference between permanent hiding and eventual understanding. "Elliot, I didn't give her our location. I didn't compromise the quarry. I asked questions. I verified." "You can't verify through a radio." "No, but I can verify knowledge." I asked her technical questions. Replication mechanisms, transmission vectors, neurological presentation specifics. She answered with precision that a non-expert couldn't fabricate. She knows what she's talking about. I leaned against the door frame. The concrete was cold against my shoulder. What does she know? Marcus pulled his headphones off and set them on the desk. His face in the dim light of the radio console was drawn, older than it had been 6 weeks ago. The pathogen is fungal, not viral. Cordyceps adjacent, heavily modified. She believes it's engineered, not naturally evolved. The neurological takeover is complete within 48 hours of exposure. There is no recovery, but... He raised a finger. The infection requires direct fluid contact. It is not airborne. The clicking behavior serves coordination, not transmission. And the infected have a weakness she's identified through tissue analysis. Their modified nervous system is hypersensitive to specific ultrasonic frequencies. Not enough to kill them, but enough to disorient, to break the auditory chain. I absorbed this in silence. Non-airborne. That confirmed what we'd observed. No one in our group had become infected, despite weeks of proximity to the surface. But the ultrasonic vulnerability, that was new. That was something. "She wants to come here," I said. Not a question. "She wants somewhere stable to continue work. She has equipment that requires power. She has data that requires protection. 2 more people, 2 more mouths, 2 more variables. 2 more minds, 2 more skill sets, 2 more reasons to believe this isn't permanent." I didn't decide that morning. I told Marcus I needed time, and he gave it, 24 hours. I spent those hours with Lily, helping her with her reading workbook, watching her sound out words with fierce concentration. She was on a page about animals. "Predator," she read, her finger tracing the letters. "An animal that hunts other animals." She looked up at me. "Uncle Elliot, are we predators or prey?" "Neither," I said. "We're something else." "What?" I didn't have an answer, but I thought about it. What we were. Hiding wasn't prey behavior. What I'd done on the upper shelf wasn't prey behavior. But it wasn't predator behavior either. It was something between. Something that hadn't existed before, because the categories had been different. That evening, I told Marcus to arrange a meeting point. Neutral ground. I'd go alone with the Mossberg. If Dr. Chen was real, if she checked out in person, if my gut said yes, then we'd discuss terms. "And if your gut says no," Marcus asked, "then she finds somewhere else. And if she can't, if she dies out there with data that could help everyone?" I looked at him. "Marcus, who never pushed unless the stakes were absolute. Marcus, who'd seen disaster and knew the arithmetic of aid, the cold math of how many you save versus how many you sacrifice. Then that's the cost, I said, of keeping 4 people alive in a hole in the ground. He nodded. He didn't argue, but I saw the disagreement in the set of his jaw, and I carried it with me through the night like a stone in my chest. And I met Ava Chen at dawn on a limestone outcropping half a mile north of the quarry's eastern boundary. I'd scouted the location the day before, open sight lines in 3 directions, a single approach path through sparse woodland, nowhere to hide in ambush. I arrived 30 minutes early and waited in the tree line with the Mossberg across my knees. She appeared at 06:10, small-framed early 40s, wearing a hiking pack that sat low and heavy on her hips. Behind her, Tomas, taller, younger, mid-20s, carrying a hard-sided case in both arms like something precious. No visible weapons on either of them. I stepped out when they were 50 feet away. Ava stopped immediately, one hand raised to halt Tomas. She looked at the shotgun, then at my face. "Elliot?" she said. Marcus had given her my name, another thing I hadn't authorized. "Dr. Chen." "Ava, please." She didn't move closer. "Thank you for meeting us." Up close, she looked like someone who'd been burning her own reserves for weeks. Dark circles, chapped lips, a precision in her movements that spoke of conserving energy at every junction. But her eyes were alert, sharp, cataloging me the way I was cataloging her. "Show me what you have," I said. She nodded to Tomas, who knelt and opened the hard case on the ground. Inside, a compact PCR machine, sealed sample containers, a laptop in a waterproof sleeve, stacks of handwritten notes in cramped script. He handled each item with the care of someone who understood that these objects were more valuable than the people carrying them. 3 months of tissue analysis, Ava said. 57 samples from infected subjects at various stages. Complete genomic sequencing of the pathogen. Transmission modeling, and, she paused, preliminary identification of the ultrasonic frequency range that disrupts their neural coordination, between 18 and 22 kilohertz. We've tested it in the field twice. Both times it broke the clicking chain within a 40-meter radius. Tested how? A modified speaker, powered by a car battery. Crude but effective, the infected in range became disoriented for approximately 90 seconds. Enough time to evade, not enough to rely on in sustained contact. Why do you need us? Find a military installation, a government remnant, someone who can actually use this. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. We've tried, 3 times. The first 2 installations we located were overrun. The third, she glanced at Tomas. He looked at the ground. The third turned us away. They weren't interested in research. They were interested in walls. Walls keep people alive. Walls keep people alive today. Understanding keeps people alive next year. The year after. You have power. You have stability. You have somewhere I can work. That's all I'm asking for. I studied her. Studied Tomas. Quiet, deferential, but with hands that were steady and a posture that suggested competence rather than submission. He met my eyes briefly. There was exhaustion there and something else. Grief, maybe. Recent and unprocessed. 2 conditions, I said. First, you share everything. All data, all findings, all work. No locked doors, no private research. If you discover something that affects our survival, we know immediately. Agreed. Second, you follow the rules of the quarry. Silence protocols, access restrictions. My decisions on security are final. if you can't live with that. I'm a scientist, not a diplomat. Tell me the rules. I'll follow them. All I need is a table, power, and to be left alone to work. I looked at the hard case on the ground, at the laptop that might contain hope, or might contain nothing actionable, or might bring danger we couldn't predict. At two strangers asking to enter the place I'd built specifically to keep strangers out. The man on the upper shelf, his son screaming, the weight of the mall. I thought about what Marcus had said, about staying human, about the difference between surviving and living, about how every no I spoke calcified me further into something efficient and terrible. Follow me, I said. Don't speak above a whisper until we're below the rim. They followed, and the quarry's population grew to 6. Ava worked with a focus that made my own obsessive preparation look casual. Within 3 days of arriving, she'd transformed the secondary storage room into a laboratory, or the closest approximation possible, underground. The PCR machine hummed quietly on a concrete shelf, powered by our solar battery bank during peak charge hours. Her notes covered every flat surface, held down by river stones Lily collected from the quarry floor. Tomas was her hands. He prepared samples, calibrated equipment, maintained the cold chain for their tissue specimens using a modified camping cooler and chemical ice packs. He spoke rarely. When he did, his accent was faint, Mexican-American, his sentences brief and technical. I learned his story in fragments over the first week. PhD candidate in mycology, 6 months from defending his dissertation when the outbreak began. His advisor had been Ava's colleague. His advisor had been in Nashville when Nashville fell. Lily was fascinated by them both. She'd stand in the laboratory doorway, silent per protocol, watching Ava pipette solutions with wide eyes. Ava noticed on the second day, and without breaking her workflow, began explaining what she was doing in whispered sentences calibrated to a 7-year-old's comprehension. "I'm looking at very tiny pieces of the sick thing," she said, holding a sample tube up to the light for Lily to see. "If I can understand how the tiny pieces fit together, maybe I can figure out how to make them fall apart." "Like a puzzle," Lily whispered. Exactly like a puzzle. Nora watched this interaction from the corridor, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Later, she found me in the main room and said, "I don't like her working with those samples near Lily. The samples are sealed. Ava's protocols are rigorous. Marcus checked." Marcus is not a virologist. Neither are we. That's why she's here. Nora's jaw tightened. "I'm trusting you, Elliot. I'm trusting you with my daughter's life, in a hole in the ground, with strangers who carry disease samples. Don't make me regret it." "You won't." I said it with more certainty than I felt. But Nora needed certainty from me the way Lily needed sky. Not because it was always available, but because without it the weight of stone above us became psychological as well as physical. Week 8. Ava's work produced its first actionable result. She gathered us in the main room after Lily was asleep. All 5 adults around the folding table, the battery lantern casting warm light on faces that had grown thinner, sharper, more defined by shadow. "The frequency works," she said without preamble. "I've refined the range. 19.7 kilohertz, pulsed at 40 millisecond intervals. In laboratory conditions, such as they are, it causes immediate synaptic disruption in the fungal neural network. The infected tissue samples show complete cessation of coordinated electrical activity for up to 3 minutes. Laboratory conditions, Marcus said, meaning in a tube, not in a field with 40 infected running at you. Correct. But the principle is sound. The fungal mycelium that replaces normal neural pathways is significantly more sensitive to ultrasonic resonance than healthy human tissue. It's a structural weakness inherent to the organism's adaptation. They traded robustness for speed. "So, what do we need?" I asked. "A directional speaker capable of sustained output at that frequency. Significant power, more than a car battery can provide reliably. And a way to test it in controlled field conditions without getting killed." That's a long list. It's a shorter list than cure the infection. I'm not promising salvation. I'm promising a tool. Possibly the first tool that works against them that isn't a bullet or a locked door. Tomas spoke then, his voice quiet but firm. "The equipment exists. Commercial ultrasonic deterrent systems, used for pest control, crowd dispersal. Before the outbreak, you could order them online. Now," he shrugged, "we'd need to find one, or build one." "Where would you find one?" Marcus asked. "Agricultural supply, university acoustics labs. Some law enforcement departments had LRAD systems with adjustable frequency ranges." Tomas pulled a folded map from his back pocket, annotated in pencil, marked with circles and crosses. "The University of Kentucky campus is 43 miles northeast. The physics department had an acoustics research lab, if it hasn't been completely looted." 43 miles, Nora said. "Through what?" No one answered. We all knew through what. The silence stretched. The ventilation system whispered. Somewhere deep in the cave network, water dripped in a rhythm that had become as familiar as a heartbeat. "I'll go," I said. Marcus argued against it for 2 hours. Not the mission. The mission he accepted as necessary. He argued against me being the one to go. "You're not the most expendable person here, Elliot. You built this place. You know its systems better than anyone. You know the systems as well as I do, better in some cases. Then send me. You're 51 with a bad knee. 43 miles on foot through hostile territory isn't a consulting gig. And you've never done anything like this either. I've done one thing like this." The words came out flat, and Marcus flinched. I hadn't meant it as a weapon, but it landed like one. I'd killed a man. That made me the logical choice for a mission where killing might be required. The calculus was brutal and clear, and we both knew it. Tomas volunteered to accompany me. His reasoning was practical. He knew the campus layout, knew where the acoustics lab was located, knew what equipment we needed and what we could leave behind. I agreed. Ava argued briefly. Tomas was essential to her work, but subsided when he pointed out that the work was meaningless without the equipment. We planned for 3 days. Marcus drew route options based on terrain maps and what we'd gathered from radio intelligence about infected concentration patterns. Dense population areas were worst. Cities, suburbs, highway corridors where traffic had piled up and trapped people in their cars. Rural routes were safer but longer. We plotted a path that skirted south of Lexington, approached the university from the agricultural side, and returned via a different route to avoid establishing a pattern. Supplies: 3 days of food, water purification tablets, the Mossberg for me, the Ruger for Tomas. He'd revealed quietly that he'd grown up hunting in West Texas and could shoot competently. A hand-drawn map, a compass, 2 radios with a single pre-arranged check-in time. 300 hours. When human activity and infected movement were both at their lowest. The morning we left, Lily was still asleep. Nora stood at the secondary entrance, the one that emerged onto the quarry bench, and watched us climb the rock stairs in pre-dawn darkness. She didn't say be careful. She didn't say come back. She put her hand on my arm as I passed, and squeezed once and let go. Marcus shook my hand. If you're not back in 5 days, I seal the quarry and we go dark, permanently. Understood. Come back in 4. Tomas and I moved through the woodland above the quarry and turned east into a world I hadn't seen in 8 weeks, except through binoculars. The road was empty, leaves blown across the asphalt in drifts. Abandoned cars sat at intervals, doors open, some with dark stains on the upholstery. We moved parallel to the road, 50 meters into the tree line, stopping every few minutes to listen. The first hour was silent. The second brought sound, distant, rhythmic, that clicking lighthouse had described. Multiple sources, southeast, maybe half a mile. We froze against a concrete drainage culvert and waited 20 minutes until the sound faded eastward. They were moving, Tomas whispered. Coordinated direction, like migration. Or hunting. Same thing for them. We covered 11 miles that first day, moving slowly, hiding frequently. Every abandoned building was a risk assessment. Potential shelter, potential trap, potential supply cache, potential nest. We avoided all of them. Slept that night in a highway overpass maintenance closet, concrete walls on all sides, the door barricaded with a jack stand from an abandoned tow truck. At 0300, I keyed the radio. Quarry, quarry. Marcus's voice immediate. Copy, status. Green, 11 miles, no contact. Copy, green here, channel clear. I slept for 2 hours. The Mossberg across my chest, the concrete floor cold and real beneath me. Tomas took watch, sitting against the door, the Ruger in his lap, his eyes open and fixed on something I couldn't see. The memory of someone or something, held close in the dark. We reached the university campus at dusk on day 2. The approach was worse than the journey. Lexington's outer suburbs showed the marks of early panic. Burned storefronts, overturned vehicles, the particular devastation of people who'd fought each other before the infected had even arrived. But the campus itself was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Not empty, quiet. The difference between a room with no one in it and a room where someone is holding their breath. The physics building was on the northeast corner of campus. A brutalist concrete structure from the 1970s with narrow windows and heavy doors. One entrance was barricaded from the inside, chairs, desks, a vending machine pushed against the glass. The other entrance, on the building's north face, stood open. Dark inside, no sound. Tomas touched my arm, pointed. The door frame had marks, scratches in the metal, deep, parallel. 5 lines. Fingernails, or what used to be fingernails. We waited 30 minutes, watched, listened. Nothing moved, nothing clicked. I went first. Mossberg up, flashlight taped to the barrel. A crude solution, but it kept both hands on the weapon. The hallway inside was littered with papers, ceiling tiles, a single shoe. The air smelled stale, but not rotten. Whatever had happened here happened weeks ago. Tomas navigated from memory, leading us up a stairwell to the 3rd floor. The acoustics lab was room 314, a double-width door with a security keypad, now dead. The door was ajar. We pushed through into a space that made Tomas exhale audibly. Intact, mostly. Equipment racks lined the walls. Speakers, amplifiers, signal generators, measurement devices. Some had been knocked over, and glass crunched underfoot from a shattered oscilloscope. But the core equipment, the directional speakers, the frequency generators, the amplification systems, sat undisturbed on their mounts. There, Tomas said, moving to a rack-mounted unit the size of a large suitcase. Parametric speaker array. directional output, adjustable frequency, high-power driver. This is what we need. He began disconnecting cables with practiced efficiency, his earlier quietness replaced by focused energy. I stood at the door, watching the hallway. The building was silent. Too silent. I'd learned in 8 weeks to distrust silence as much as sound. Silence could mean safety, or it could mean something waiting. Tomas worked for 15 minutes, loaded the speaker array and a frequency generator into our packs. Heavy, brutally heavy, but manageable. He grabbed cables, a power inverter, documentation in a binder. When he finished, he was sweating despite the cool air. "Let's go," I said. We made it to the stairwell, down 1 flight. Then I heard it, not clicking, breathing, human breathing, ragged from behind a closed door on the 2nd floor landing. I raised a hand. Tomas stopped. We listened. A voice. Weak. "Help." Then again. "Please, I can hear you." Male, young, terrified. Behind a locked door, locked from the inside. Safe then. Hiding. Alive. Tomas looked at me. In his eyes, the question. In my chest, the weight of the mall, the memory of a man on the upper shelf, the sound of a boy screaming. "We can't," I whispered. "He's alive. We can't carry a third person and this equipment 40 miles. We can't leave someone to die in a locked room. I have before." Tomas stared at me. Then something changed in his face. Not disgust, not judgment. Understanding. The understanding of someone who now saw what this world had cost me and what it might cost him. He knocked on the door, softly, 3 times. "Who's there?" The voice, desperate, young. "Living, uninfected. We're passing through." Tomas kept his voice barely above breath. "Can you move?" Yes, I think so. I've been here for, I don't know, days, a week maybe." "Open the door." Slowly. The lock turned. A face appeared, early 20s, gaunt, dehydrated, blinking in our flashlight beam. A student, maybe. He wore a campus security uniform 2 sizes too large. "I'm Jonah," he said. "Please don't leave me here." I looked at Tomas. Tomas looked at me. The equipment weighed 40 pounds between us. The quarry was 40 miles away. Marcus's deadline was 3 days. "Can you carry weight?" I asked. "Anything. I'll carry anything." I handed him the frequency generator. 22 pounds. He took it like it was made of air. 3 of us now, moving through the dead campus in full dark, weighed down with equipment that might change everything or might change nothing. The clicking started as we crossed the parking structure, distant, north, but present. A chain beginning. We moved faster. The return took 3 days instead of 2. Jonah slowed us, not from weakness, but from fear. Every sound froze him. Every shadow required processing before he could move. He'd survived alone in that room for 9 days on vending machine food and sink water, listening to things move through the hallway outside. 9 days of silence and terror had rewired his nervous system into something that no longer responded normally to stimuli. Tomas walked with him, talked him through it in whispers, steady, patient, the same methodical focus he brought to lab work applied now to keeping a stranger functional. I walked point, Mossberg ready, and felt the distance between us like a physical thing. I was not patient. I was not gentle. I was the mechanism that moved forward and eliminated obstacles. And somewhere in the preceding weeks, I had stopped being embarrassed by that. Day 2 of return. Southeast of Lexington, rural route. Soybean fields gone wild on either side of a county road. We heard the chain before we saw them. Clicking, propagating from the south. 3 or 4 sources, moving west along a tree line. We were in the open, No cover for 200 meters in any direction except a drainage ditch running parallel to the road. "Ditch," I said. "Now." We dropped into it, 3 feet deep, muddy, cold. Pressed ourselves flat against the earth. Jonah was shaking. Tomas put a hand on his shoulder, said nothing, kept pressure there. I held the Mossberg aimed south, tracking sound. They appeared at the tree line. 5 infected, moving in loose formation. Not a line, not a cluster, but something organic, spaced at intervals that suggested coordination without communication. Except they were communicating. The clicking, passing between them like a current, each one oriented toward the next. They moved west, perpendicular to our position. 100 meters, 75, 50. At 50 meters, the nearest one stopped. Its head, his head, it had been a man once, wearing the remnants of a flannel shirt, turned toward us, not seeing, listening. The others continued moving, but this one stood still, head cocked, the clicking cessated. Silence from it. Listening. I pressed my face into the mud. Didn't breathe. Beside me, Tomas and Jonah were stone. The equipment in our packs shifted slightly, a cable settling, barely a sound. But in that silence, it felt like a gunshot. The infected took 2 steps toward the ditch. I sighted on its chest. 30 meters now. If I fired, the sound would bring the other 4. And the clicking chain would bring more. And more. Lighthouse's arithmetic. 15 minutes. 40 infected. From a single sound. It took another step, then stopped. Its head rotated, slowly, mechanically, back toward the west. Toward the retreating group. Some signal I couldn't perceive called it back. It turned and followed, the clicking resuming, the chain re-establishing, and they moved west along the tree line until the sound faded into distance. We stayed in the ditch for 40 minutes. Jonah was crying silently, his face in the mud, his body shaking with suppressed sound. I let him. Some fears demand expression, or they break you from the inside. When we moved again, Tomas said quietly, "The speaker, if we'd had it assembled, if we'd had power." I know. 90 seconds of disorientation. That's 90 seconds to run. I know. We have to make this work, Elliot. We will. That night, the last night before reaching the quarry, we sheltered in an abandoned tobacco barn. Jonah slept immediately, exhaustion overriding terror. Tomas sat with me in the dark, the equipment between us like a shared purpose. "The man on the upper shelf," he said. "Marcus told me. Marcus talks too much. He told me because I needed to understand the rules, why you are the way you are." A pause. "You're not wrong to be hard, but you're not right either. Both things exist. What exists is what keeps people alive. Jonah's alive because I knocked on that door." I had no rebuttal. He was right. Jonah was alive because Thomas had a capacity I'd lost, or spent, or surrendered on a limestone shelf 8 weeks ago. The question was whether that capacity was a strength or a vulnerability. I still don't know. Some questions don't resolve. They just change shape with time. At 0300, I radioed Marcus. Quarry. Copy. 1 day out. 3 souls, green." A pause. Then, 3. I'll explain. Copy. We'll be ready. We reached the quarry at noon on the 5th day. Marcus's deadline. Exactly. He was at the upper rim with the Mossberg, Nora beside him with binoculars, scanning the tree line as we emerged from the woodland. I raised one hand. He lowered the weapon. Jonah stared at the quarry with an expression I recognized from 6 weeks ago on Nora's face. Incomprehension giving way to something like awe. The scale of it. 67 acres of carved earth, the sheer walls, the hidden architecture below. "You built this?" he said. "We built it," I said, "and you're going to earn your place in it." Harsh. Necessary. The quarry wasn't charity. It was an organism that required contribution from every cell. Jonah nodded. He didn't question. 9 days alone in a locked room had burned away whatever resistance he might have once offered to being told what to do. The reunion below was brief. We were all too tired and too aware of what came next. Ava took the equipment from our packs with trembling hands, her professional composure breaking for the first time since I'd known her. She turned the parametric speaker array over in her hands, examining the drivers and housing, and said, "This will work. Give me 3 days." It took 5. Ava and Thomas worked around the clock, calibrating, modifying, testing at sub-threshold levels that the human ear could barely register. Marcus rigged a dedicated power supply from our battery bank. Jonah carried batteries, held tools, did whatever was asked without complaint. He was competent, former campus security, which meant basic electrical knowledge and a comfort with systems. He slotted into our group like a piece we hadn't known was missing. On the 5th day, Ava called us together. "It's ready for field testing," she said. The device sat on the lab table, the speaker array connected to the frequency generator, powered by a lithium pack that would provide 20 minutes of sustained output. 19.7 kilohertz, pulsed at 40 milliseconds. Effective range, based on the array's specifications, should be approximately 60 meters directional. "Should be," I said. "We won't know until we test it, on live subjects." She met my eyes. "I need you to find me infected to test it on." The silence in the room was absolute. Then Marcus laughed, a short, surprised sound. "You want us to go find zombies, on purpose?" "Within controlled conditions, a small group, isolated, where we can observe the effect and retreat if it fails. And if it fails, then we run, and I redesign." I looked around the room. Marcus calculating, Nora pale but steady, Thomas certain, Jonah frightened but present, Ava waiting. "The flooded pit," I said. "The lower quarry level. It's enclosed, walls on all sides, only one access point from the bench above. If we can draw a small group down there. Contained environment, observation from above, multiple retreat options." Marcus was nodding. "It could work. We'd need bait." "Sound," Tomas said. "Their own mechanism used against them. A speaker at the pit floor, playing recorded clicking at high volume. Draw them in with their own signal." Ava's eyes lit. "Yes. Layer the clicking signal to draw them in, then hit them with a 19.7 once they're concentrated in the pit. We observe from the bench. 60-foot elevation advantage." It was insane. It was the first proactive thing we'd done since the world ended. Not hiding, not defending, reaching forward. I thought of my father. Not the burial, but before. The way he'd faced his diagnosis. Not with acceptance, not with denial. With a quiet fury that looked, from the outside, like calm. He'd said the week before he died, "I'm not going to outlast this thing, Elliot. But I'm going to understand it before it takes me." I hadn't understood then. I understood now. "Tomorrow," I said. "We set it up tomorrow." The test worked. Not perfectly. The disorientation lasted 70 seconds rather than 90. And one of the 4 infected we drew into the pit recovered faster than the others. Marcus put that one down with the Mossberg from the bench above. But 3 of them. 3 stood in the pit, clicking gone silent, bodies twitching in confused circles, their coordination shattered like glass hit at its resonant frequency. 70 seconds. In those 70 seconds, we weren't prey. We weren't hiding. We were something else. The thing I'd told Lily we were, the unnamed category between predator and prey. Something that understands. I write this at the radio console. 3 months after the outbreak. Lighthouse still broadcasts nightly. 2 other settlements have made contact, carefully, slowly, through Ava's published frequency data shared in encoded bursts. We are not alone. We are not safe. But we are not only surviving. The quarry holds 7 souls now. A builder, an engineer, a mother, a child, a scientist, a mycologist, and a boy who was locked in a room until someone knocked. Below us, 67 acres of stone. Above us, a world still being consumed. Between, the hum of a frequency generator charging, and a 7-year-old girl learning to sign the word for tomorrow.